Good morning. It is July 5th, and this is Whitney Will of Star Hearth Astrology, and I am here to talk about the third quarter of the lunar cycle, which goes from today, July 5th, well, I guess last night at the eclipse, until July 12th. So I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to work with some slides. And if you enjoy that, please comment and let me know, or if you would prefer if I kept my notes off to the side and you could just listen. Of course, you can just listen anyway, but I'm going to be using some visual aids today. And if you want to give me some feedback about that, that would be awesome. Okay, let's hop right into it. Okay, so we are looking at the third quarter, and that is the third quarter of the lunar cycle. So that is going from the full moon to our quarter moon. So it covers the full moon phase and the waning gibbous lunar phase, and we'll get into that. I wanted to start by doing a little bit of a recap of everything that happened last week. Last week is, in a lot of ways, a much bigger week than this week, astrologically. This week ahead, we've got a lot of moon stuff, but not really a lot of other planetary stuff, which is kind of nice. We get a little bit of a breather to decompress from everything that has been happening. So we had the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction late on the 29th or in the 30th. And we're still seeing the effects of that. As I said in my previous forecast, the first one was April 4th. And we saw a lot of lockdowns happening right there, surges around COVID, and similarly, we're seeing some of those things this week. So we're seeing a pause on a lot of reopening. We've had the 3 biggest days in new cases, all over 50,000 new cases for the last 3 days since that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. So we're seeing a similar swelling, right? Pluto can enlarge things, Jupiter can enlarge things. We're dealing with difficult things here. So we're still riding that wave, and that conjunction is really in effect for most of the year because at this point they're moving so slowly, they stay so close together. So we live in that general tone, and then they have exact hits. The third Jupiter-Pluto conjunction will happen in November, just after the election. I think that's November 12th. Then we had the Sun-Mercury cazimi. So that's the midpoint in Mercury's retrograde, where it comes in contact with the heart of the sun, and we get a piece of information, or we get some clarity around whatever this Mercury retrograde is for us. This Mercury retrograde in Cancer can bring up themes of nostalgia, dealing with family, issues of the home, that kind of thing. So if that stuff is coming up for you, hopefully there was a moment of clarity where you could kind of course correct. We're still in the retrograde until the end of this week. So we're still kind of in this mulling things over phase, but there should be less kind of direct disturbance, less Mercury retrograde interventions, as some people call them, where we get really frustrated and wires get crossed. So still not moving forward super clearly, but we're through what is usually the roughest part of the retrograde. Then we had Saturn move into Capricorn on July 1st. And so that's a return to some of those themes. If you are just wrapping up your Saturn return in Capricorn, we'll get a few more months of that. I did a video that covered Saturn's time in Capricorn pretty extensively, so you can check that out. I think we're seeing some interesting things come up around that in the news. The arrest of Epstein's girlfriend, I can't pronounce her first name, Maxwell, her second Saturn return is happening right now and was at the very end of Capricorn. And so we saw when Saturn went into Capricorn, she got arrested. And so she will still have to go through the majority of her second Saturn return. So we're seeing things like that, especially because Saturn in Capricorn can really bring kind of what we deserve and the law. So Saturn does not like us to get away with things, because while the younger parts of ourselves may be excited about that and consider that a win, our soul generally wants us to go through lessons and not get away with stuff. And Saturn can facilitate that. So then we had last night a Capricorn full moon lunar eclipse. And so we don't always, the moment of the eclipse have something big happen to us. And eclipses have much longer windows to take effect. So really what we're seeing is kind of the culmination, or really the closing of the time period that the Capricorn solar eclipse, which happened in January, began. And so we're seeing some of those things wrap up right around now. But also, we can take a few days to kind of realize what's sinking in, what culminated and ended right around now. Also, we made it through our final eclipse of eclipse season. So we made it through 3 eclipses. So we're in the last 2 weeks of eclipse season, until we have the second Cancer new moon that happens on July 20th. And so in the last 2 weeks of the eclipse season, we're still in this strange place where time doesn't really feel real during eclipse season. Stuff can bubble up from the past, stuff can kind of emerge from the future. And we kind of have the opportunity to confront our own fate, or some people are more comfortable with the word karma in this way. And we can really do deep work with ourselves during eclipse season. So we've got 2 more weeks of that. It's harder to do work out in the world. And I think people are feeling a little bit cloudy and a little bit frustrated in terms of making progress or being able to make plans or not. And all I can offer to that is validation and empathy, because it is really hard to make plans right now, and it's hard to kind of bet on the future. And that's reflected in the astrology, and also right in our collective experience of everything that's going on, and kind of this great identity crisis that's happening. Okay, so that was last week, and all of those things are big things. We've got kind of a tinier week ahead that's just gentler. We've got just a couple things, but I'm going to go through all of the lunar stuff too, because this is a lunar forecast. So here we go. So in looking at the 3rd quarter of the lunar cycle, I mentioned we have 2 moon phases. The full moon phase, which goes from when the moon is 180 degrees away from the sun to 225. Ooh, numbers. And so the full moon is really, it's the point of no return. It's the point of commitment. So everything that you dreamt during the new moon and then kind of decided we're really going to throw your effort behind at the 1st quarter moon, you're fully committed to at the full moon. And so this is not the time to go back to the drawing board. This is the time to kind of do what you set out to do. And so it has that feel to it. It's in the bright hemicycle, so it has to do with the stuff that we are actually doing out in the world, what is actually happening in the light. This is about our engagement with stuff outside of us, so it can be a busier time. And in fact, full moons can feel a little bit overcommitted. But don't worry, as with everything, it passes. So you do what you do to get through it, which is either saying no or knuckling down and just trying to muscle through, or however it is that you do it. And that is also going to depend on the moon phase that you were born under. I am totally overstimulated, usually during full moons, because I was born at a new moon, and all of the concrete details and concrete logistics that happen that are just part of being fully in the world are really difficult. So let me know your experience and your moon phase. Then we have the waning gibbous, which we'll switch into on the 8th. And the waning gibbous phase is the kind of the phase where we begin to detach. So it's the last phase before we go back into the dark hemicycle. So we kind of see what happened. We're still doing work in the world, but we're beginning to kind of let go of it and not to take ourselves so seriously, not to think that we are the hero of everything. And so we are much more willing to be a participant and to do our part, but to be less attached to what everything looks like and what it means for us. We kind of reconcile with the ways in which we're limited, right? So we're starting to see, oh, okay, I had this vision. It came to some kind of crisis. I made the choices I made. I took the actions that I made. It culminated in some way. I saw it through, and this is what happened. And it probably wasn't perfect because we can't really do things perfectly. And so we kind of start beginning to forgive ourselves, beginning to forgive the world, and we're kind of sinking back in to the dark and move back towards the numinous, where we are kind of less emphasized as our individual selves. So that is the feeling of the week ahead. It's probably going to be busy. There's going to be demands. We're still in the bright hemicycle, but we're beginning to kind of move again towards rest and to kind of let go of what we think is so important to accomplish. Okay, so Sunday, we begin the day with the moon in Capricorn. It sextiles Neptune and Pisces. So we get a little bit of dreaminess, which may make it hard to be productive in the morning hours of Sunday. So you may have big to-do lists for the week. Maybe you are celebrating the 4th. Maybe you are not celebrating the 4th. Maybe you are contemplating all the ways in which America is maybe not living up to its ideals. And kind of wherever you fall on that spectrum, Neptune and Pisces kind of softens that. So there's a little bit of softness that can look like laziness, especially because the moon in Capricorn likes to get stuff done. But it's just really saying we're going to take time and be a little bit gentle with ourselves, and and we'll wait till the afternoon. Then we have the moon conjoining Jupiter. The moon conjoining Jupiter in Capricorn. Again, Jupiter in Capricorn is not a super happy guy. And so this is really just coming to terms with kind of where we are, getting our clear sights on the week, really kind of making peace with how much we can get done and really what are the limits within the structure that we live. And that can be anything. That can be family structure. It's not necessarily political. That can be kind of the structure of our thoughts. And then an hour later, the moon will conjoin Pluto, which can kind of bring us down. It can kind of, when the moon conjoins Pluto, things can get blown out of proportion emotionally. So just watch yourself, especially if you're around other people or if you're alone. Things can get blown out of proportion that way too. something that's really not a big deal can seem like a really big deal, something you can kind of like let slip by, and then realize, oh wait, actually this is kind of a big deal. So just watching for that. Also, Pluto can make it kind of dark. So yeah, this can be a case of what is called the Sunday scaries, I believe, which is a little bit of that anxiety that happens before we start a new week. So that's what we're looking at for Sunday. On Monday, while hopefully we're all asleep. Oh, and I forgot to mention, all these times are in Mountain Time. So you can just add a couple hours or take them away for your local time. The moon in Capricorn can join Saturn, right? So this is important, even though we'll all be asleep. So it's not going to be something that you're thinking about in your dreams. Although if you do, please let me know, because that sounds really interesting. The moon is in Capricorn for the first time since Saturn moved back into Capricorn. So, oh goodness, and the lawnmower just started outside. So I apologize for that. Hopefully it's not too loud. Okay. So the moon in Capricorn can join Saturn. Saturn just moved back into Capricorn last week. And so this is kind of the moon's first visit, which is also kind of our body's first visit. It's become personal for the first time since Saturn has made that transit. So we might wake up with on Monday feeling a little bit like heavier, feeling kind of like the weight of, oh, Saturn has returned to Capricorn. Things have become, things feel a little bit different than what it was like with Saturn in Aquarius. So now we're kind of remetabolizing the weight of whatever Capricorn signifies kind of personally for you in your chart and the personal work around that. So again, if it's your Saturn return, it's going to be stuff like that. Whatever you were working on before, and it kind of hits home again. Then at 4 a.m., the moon enters Aquarius, so pretty quickly. So we wake up with moon in Aquarius. And hums along, then sextiles Mars and Aries. Again, the moon sextile Mars and Aries, I love sextiles. I think of them like little, I don't know, they just kind of like tickle you. So the moon and Mars can kind of egg each other on in terms of, okay, all of this weighty Capricorn stuff, let's like get rational about what can really happen. And Mars and Aries is all about making things happen. So we can kind of have some clear sight about that. And then later in the evening, the moon trines Venus and Gemini. So that's pretty nice. We've got some clarity from the moon in Aquarius trining our newly direct Venus and Gemini. It would be a good time to make kind of social plans for the rest of the week. Oh goodness, that lawnmower. Okay, then we have the moon sextile Chiron in Aries. And this is kind of important because Chiron, one of the things that does happen this week is that Chiron is going to station retrograde. So, so the moon is kind of checking in with Chiron, kind of adding that stuff to the to-do list. So Monday, great day for planning the rest of the week. What we're going to do to take action, how we're going to help ourselves, kind of the social tenor of the week. Then Tuesday, absolutely nothing happens. And we have a void moon, which means the moon is not going to make any other aspects to anything for the rest of its time in Aquarius. So I don't always notice this, but people talk about the void moon is a little bit like a Mercury retrograde in terms of It's hard for things to keep pace. Appointments get canceled. People just forget about things. There's a lot of confusion with the void moon. So Tuesday just kind of has nothing. But let me know what your experience is of Tuesday, because I don't necessarily always pay attention to when the moon is void or not, unless it's like this, which is like a whole day that we don't have anything. Then on Wednesday, we begin with the Mars in Aries square to Mercury in Cancer. So Mercury is still retrograde. It's still moving backwards through Cancer. Mars is moving forwards through Aries. They're going to form a 90-degree angle with each other. And this is really a time for angry, emotional outbursts. And so this aspect will be active all week, and so that's something that we should really look out for. And if you guys want to pray for me that I don't have a baby born on this day, but my son will probably have this aspect in his chart, and I'm a little bit nervous about it because I think it could, looking ahead towards his life and towards the toddler meltdowns, I think they could be pretty brutal with Mercury, how we express ourselves in such an emotional and conflicted place, and Mars in such an aggressive place, and then bringing them in tension with each other. So, what can be really good is a cardio workout to handle this aspect. So to sweat out your Mars and to really work out your lungs as well with Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Mercury is the lungs in Cancer. There's a lot of fluid. Cancer is also the chest. We're also seeing interesting things happening with COVID coming back. So you could also see some things around that. But this is really an emotionally volatile aspect. And with the moon in Pisces ruling that Mercury in Cancer, things can get over emotional. So just watch yourself. Actually, I guess the moon is in Aquarius for that particular one. And luckily it happens at 4:41 a.m. But just watch your morning. Okay, then at noon, the moon enters Pisces, where it comes under the rulership of Jupiter, who is in Capricorn. And so I think with Jupiter in Capricorn, the moon in Pisces feels really overwhelmed. So this is what, if you're going to start crying from exhaustion, it's probably going to happen during these days of the month. So just watch yourself. The moon in Pisces has a hard time with setting up boundaries. And so kind of your emotional environment becomes more significant during these days because you can't really filter things out. Really, it's about taking yourself out of certain situations if you notice that you're getting overwhelmed. And we have just right after that, the moon enters the waning gibbous phase. So we've got that little bit of a shift. So we should have a tiny bit of the volume turned down from the busyness of the full moon. And so now we're going to start to gain a little bit of perspective on what that was. And we're going to detach a little bit and we can, so we're backing away kind of slowly. And we're going to be metabolizing that in Pisces, which is pretty emotional, as I said. So let me know how that goes. And then late in the evening, it runs straight into a trine with Mercury in Cancer. So now we've got the moon in a water sign, trining Mercury, retrograde in a water sign. And so, watch for the waterworks. As I've mentioned before, I was born with my natal moon in Virgo, and I always just know if I'm going to cry during the month, it's going to be when the moon is in Pisces. There's something about the moon in the opposite sign from your natal moon that can just feel kind of the most out of sorts. Do you guys have that experience? Let me know where your moon is. And if you struggle when it is in the opposite sign. And on Thursday, we have the moon in Pisces square to Venus in Gemini. this, I mean, it's a square, so there's some conflict, but mutable squares I find to be really fun because everyone's so adaptable. Everyone's willing to just kind of shift around for each other. The moon in Pisces, you know, comes at it from a more emotional place, whereas Venus in Gemini comes at it from a more cerebral place. But I think that can be really fun, especially when those two mix. And then we have the moon sextile Uranus and Taurus. So we get a little bit of an energy boost, I feel like. That moon in Pisces gets a little bit of like a Taurus hit of inspiration of like, oh, you know what would feel really good to do today? I don't know, eat this, do this. For me, it's usually eating because because I'm a Cancer South Node and I have Taurus in the 4th. So kind of a simpler day. Again, right, these aspects are just happening in the morning and then we kind of coast on that. Friday is not going to be such a simple day. But again, these are a lot of moon aspects, which means they're tiny, they kind of come and go, pop, 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 pop. We've got, it's not a week where we've got huge shifts in energy. The potential for transformation is not as big as it is other weeks. Or maybe it's more because you're not trying to metabolize all of that stuff. Who knows? Okay, so just after midnight, the moon in Pisces trines the sun in Cancer. Nice. We get our luminaries, our light givers, the moon and the sun, back in harmony. They check in, they have a conversation, they get in the flow. We're in a water sign. Great. And then the moon conjoins Neptune in Pisces just before dawn. So we get that kind of dreaminess. This is a good morning to wake up and write down your dreams. And then in the morning, we're going to have the moon sextile Jupiter. So the moon in Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. It checks in with its ruler. We get this like flowy morning. And then it's going to sextile Pluto. So again, you know, we can see a little bit of a blip around things getting out of proportion, sometimes things getting unnecessary, or maybe necessarily dark. And so we kind of flow through that morning, maybe ending on a little bit of like a hiccup, not great. And then we have Venus and Gemini sextiling Chiron and Aries. Chiron is gonna station retrograde. And so they are just checking in. Venus from kind of the social sphere of Gemini, and Chiron, the wounded healer, bringing the medicine to the sign of ourselves and our impulsive action and how we assert ourselves. And then we have the moon sextile Saturn, so that's going to be the moon at the very end of Pisces, sextiling Saturn at the very end of Capricorn. So things can kind of end on a heavier note, but then we're going to have the moon shift almost immediately into Aries. And so now we've got a very different feel because, right, earlier in the week we had the moon in Capricorn for the first time since Saturn had retrograded back into Capricorn. So we had it in Capricorn with its ruler. And when the moon enters Aries, we are going to have the moon in Aries for the first time with Mars in Aries as well. So now we've got the moon in Mars's house and Mars is at home, which means like Mars can tell the moon where all the snacks are. Or, I mean, it's Aries, so maybe all of the video game controls, or maybe literally the weapons. But they can have some fun and get some stuff done. Okay, so first thing on Saturday, the moon in Aries squares Mercury in Cancer. Okay, so that is going to ping that Mars-Mercury square from earlier in the week. So we can get kind of an emotional hit of that again. So again, just watching for things flaring, for expressing yourself impulsively and emotionally. It's gonna be there. And so the other thing I mean, I guess if you're not a person that does that, this can shorten your fuse enough that you could do that. And then it's going to depend on the people around you, how they react. But you might not get reactions that you're hoping for with impulsive action around a moon in Aries square to Mercury in Cancer. Then Chiron stations retrograde at 9 degrees of Aries. So Chiron is going to be retrograde into the fall. And yeah, until December 16th. So it's going to retrograde from 9 degrees and 26 minutes to 4 degrees and 56 minutes. It'll spend quite a few years in Aries, and I think this is such a beautiful opportunity for Chiron, the medicine maker, the medicine bringer, to kind of heal the wounds of our self and whether our relationship with Aries, whatever that looks like. Yeah, and so we're just taking a pause and kind of stopping at 9 degrees to contemplate kind of what is there. So if you have anything at 9 degrees of cardinal signs, you might feel that a little bit harder. But yeah, otherwise, I don't know. I don't know how big of a deal to make of Chiron. I don't think that the asteroids kind of deserve the level of attention that we give the traditional planets, but I'm a traditional astrologer. Kind of. Okay. Then we have the moon conjoin Mars. So the moon checks in with Mars, and again, this is highlighting this Mars Mercury square. This is the moon in Aries for the first time coming into contact with the ruler of Aries, who's come home after a long time away, and he's going to be at home for a while. So Mars is going to be in Aries till January. So we're going to get a hit of this every time the moon moves through Aries. But really kind of get a sense of, okay, what's Mars's purpose, and what does that feel like in our bodies, and what does that look like in our daily lives? And then the moon is going to conjoin Chiron. So that's important because we're going to feel that Chiron retrograde. And so if we spend some time around how do I wound myself through my own action or inaction? And what is the lessons and the medicine that Chiron can offer? And then we have the moon sextile Venus in Gemini. And this is really fun. So whether you are observing social distancing and want to have Zoom drinks with your friends, this is a really good aspect for that. Or if you're actually going out and doing that, right? An impulsive moon in Aries would probably do that. So, see. And then we have, finally, Sunday, Mercury will station direct in Cancer, right in the wee hours of the morning. So we've got the little switcheroo, but it's a station. So it doesn't move forward immediately. It just kind of pauses. So we all get a collective pause around 5.5 degrees of Cancer. So again, if you have anything there in around 5 degrees of the cardinal signs, it's going to affect that. And you can feel that. From then on, it will start moving forward, but Mercury is not going to be out of the shadow of its retrograde till the end of July. So we've kind of finished the review phase of whatever the Mercury retrograde was about for you, but we still need to head into the integration phase. So we still need to integrate all of the new information or new habits or changes that have happened. So that work kind of starts now. So you can kind of take the next few days to reflect on that, which can be very useful, especially with that square to Mars. What action are we going to take? And then we have the Sun in Cancer trining Neptune in Pisces. I love Sun-Neptune trines. I have one in my chart from Virgo to Capricorn. And so it'll be interesting. I wonder if I will be having a baby right around then, and he will also have the sun trine Neptune, which that would be some sweet family astrology synastry. Yeah, that can kind of remind us of the divine work that we're doing in the world, not just the mundane work. It can kind of infuse a few hours with otherworldliness, which we can kind of do the escapism version, we can do the meditation, go deeper version. It all has to do with our choices that we make about how the experiences that we want to have here, and whether we want to kind of turn them up and experience more, or whether we want to kind of escape them and maybe see more but feel less. Whatever you want to do, I'm not going to judge it. So, moon, then we have the moon in Aries square the sun in Cancer in the evening, which brings us into the 4th quarter of the lunar month. And so I will hopefully be posting another video. Hopefully I will get it together before I have a baby. And so I will post another forecast video on Sunday for that. But just to wrap up the day, then we have the moon square Capricorn and the moon square Pluto, which can be, those things can just be frustrating because we've got the moon in Aries wanting to take action and having to, again, deal with everything that Jupiter in Capricorn and Pluto in Capricorn are signifying. So there can be next Sunday can end on a frustrating note. Okay, then looking ahead to the week ahead, we've got the sun opposite Jupiter on the 14th and Mars conjoining Chiron. So really the medicine comes to the body, comes to the warrior. We've got the warrior confronting the healer in the warrior sign. So powerful stuff, I think. And I'll get more into that in next week's forecast. We've got the sun opposite Pluto. Then we have my due date, which is not significant for you necessarily, but maybe it is. Yeah, because when I'm talking about all of this astrology, I'm also realizing, I'm aware that these are kind of the major themes and the major storylines for my child that he will live through and with for a whole lifetime. So it's kind of heavier, which I think is that Mercury in Cancer is making it hit home a little bit more. Then we have a Cancer new moon on the 20th, and on the same day, and actually as part of the lunation, the sun opposes Saturn. So we've got some big oppositions coming up next week. Things are going to get a little bit trickier. So kind of use this time, regroup if you can. Don't worry about planning. It's not about like regroup and develop the plan. I mean, you might probably want to take action without necessarily planning with all of this Aries energy that we have. Yeah, but we're still in the eclipse kind of vortex, and we've got all these retrograde planets and stuff. So this is really about regrouping, recentering on what your mission is, but not necessarily writing your 10-day, 10-month, 10-year plan. Still, we're in this place where time isn't really moving forward. Yeah, and that's what I have for you guys this week. So let me know. Feel free to leave comments if you want to take bets on when I'm going to have my little baby and which aspects are going to be highlighted for him. That's fun. Let me know if you liked the visual guides with this. And let me know how your week was. Okay. Best of luck, everyone. Goodbye.